Hey everybody, yeah, this is really new and neat. I've never really done commentary over my own, or over anything I've drawn, and I thought it was kind of a cool idea. I know a lot of you guys have been actually asking for commentaries, and there's like a small handful of speed paints I've done in the past that I thought would be really interesting to like kind of go over and talk about, and just kind of explain the process. I put up a poll of what I thought would be interesting, and you guys voted this one by a landslide. I'm actually not surprised at all that this one got voted the most. Man, I can't even believe that this was made 4 years ago, which is really crazy considering how long it's been, and I still feel like this is probably still one of my best pieces up to date. So, yeah, I remember I had never made a piece so massive before, and if anyone has ever been able to tell on the channel, it's very rare whenever I make a piece this big. I need to be like obsessed with it. Like, like I have to really, 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 really love and have a great passion for, to want to draw something so massive and not get sick of it. Just not even 10 minutes into the amount of process for something so massive. I mean, I think to give you an idea, if I remember correctly, the sheer sketch alone took 4 hours for me to put out. And as you can see throughout the whole speed paint, I even still rearranged stuff midway in. I got inspired to do a massive composition actually from this Zelda 25th anniversary speed paint that I just somehow managed to come across on YouTube, and I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. I want to do something like that, but for Undertale, you know. And and it was really difficult to kind of pick up on the sketch and everything like that. I remember struggling that I didn't want all the characters to look like trash, like a heap of trash, you know, just like a cluttered mess, and have like a kind of like a river of I don't know, landscapes in between it. So I eventually kind of figured out this vertical composition, I suppose, where the characters were more framing, like what looked like panels, like to a comic panel, going from bottom to top of telling the story. And I went from bottom to top because, you start off in the underground, and I was thinking like, okay, well, if you start off in the underground and then you try to escape and break the barrier and go back to the surface, I thought it'd be really cool to kind of, instead of going top to bottom, which is more typical when you look at like a comic or like reading or something, you go bottom from top, like what you see here. And I thought that was kind of a neat idea to kind of tell the story that way, because it's kind of symbolic to escaping the underground. So, figuring out the colors for this was quite a challenge. I've talked about it a little bit in my channel in the past before, where I actually usually start with the general composition or base flat colors for the composition behind everything first, and then I figure out intricacies later. And while I didn't record it, I actually tried to generalize a color palette multiple times to the point where I could not figure it out, and I put the project down for like I think 1 or 2 months, and then I came back to it and I was like, okay, well, let's go with the blue, and instead of trying to figure the entirety of the piece out for a color palette, I was like, let me kind of break my own rule and section off each area to kind of its own color palette and blend each color palette from there. So the bottom one, which I'm working on now, with the ruins and Toriel and all that stuff, is obviously like a purple pink, and then it goes into like blue, and then another blue to the waterfall, and then it goes into like oranges, and then back to like blues and stuff back, and then at the very surface it gets yellow. But so I actually found that treating each layer, I suppose, into its own color composition, then blending those from there, actually worked very surprisingly well. It was kind of experimental, and I was really worried it was going to come out really wrong, and it actually came out really great. Another thing with being able to not want to freaking died halfway through, not even halfway through the full composition, was because it's so big, I went with more of a messy painted style. I didn't want to cleanly refine every single character on the piece like I do with most of my paintings that have like a single character composition, you know, where I make them really clean, really refined, and like super rendered. But in this one, I purposely left them kind of unrendered for a couple reasons. And first of all, to save myself the time-consuming strain and wrist ache that it would take. I mean, like, to give you an idea, at least back then, 4 years ago, a single character would take me about 5 to 8 hours. And if I put that amount of attention to detail to every single character, this would take a lot longer than just 27 hours, which it took here. So it would probably take me around like 80 hours, and it would have been like insane. And I would have gotten so tired of it, and it would have been just this painstakingly aching project. But the other reason is actually because if I did render fully every single character, especially the smaller ones, it would just be too much to look at. It would make the piece overall flat and actually kind of bad, because it's like there would be so many focus points, your eyes wouldn't really know where to look, and it would, instead of getting lost in the piece like you want, it'd more just be like overwhelming to the eye. So yeah, so what I would do is I would essentially kind of not render all the smaller, more or less important characters like Doggo and the annoying dogs and stuff, and kind of fade them in the background, maybe blend them with the colors a little bit. But then the more important characters like Sans, I would render them a little bit more, and I would make them a little bit more like fine cleaned and more attention looking. Like, you can see the annoying dogs in the background that I'm doing now, or just a second ago. They were very, very receded back into the background. You know, they weren't even white; they were like a blue. Toriel, of course, is another one of those characters where I don't want Toriel to recede into the background, so I'm kind of rendering her a lot more, so she's a lot more sharp and a lot more refined, but not too much to make her look out of place, because if I made the big characters like Sans and Toriel and Papyrus and everything like exceptionally rendered like I do my single character compositions, then they would start to look out of place. So it was kind of interesting, you know, doing something this huge for the first time. A lot of it was very experimental, and I was kind of learning as I was going. And so it was kind of interesting finding a balance between what was too rendered versus not rendered enough, versus making sure they look like they're a part of the piece and not sticking out too much. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. Also, I was really wanting to experiment with color here, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. Like, Temmie is kind of receding more into the background, so there's a lot of purples and some green hues to match their shirt, so they kind of all have their own little bits of color compositions, and that was, I think, kind of interesting. I remember just blocking in shapes for this, and it kind of, the same concept kind of went in for the landscapes too, where it's like, okay, well, there's a mesh of a million characters on the sides, and they're framing the insides. So if they're framing the landscapes, the layers or whatever of like Snowdin and the ruins and waterfall and stuff, then I want the landscapes to be a bit more rendered. But again, it was not like too rendered though too, because it's so tiny that you wouldn't see all the detail if I put it all in. So again, it was kind of finding a balance, I guess, of what's rendered enough without losing detail or making excessive detail that's just going to disappear in the final product anyways when you zoom out and see the whole thing as a scope. So yeah, you can see I'm kind of more generalizing colors, and I kind of have it figured out. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use some of the orange to what's supposed to symbolize, to kind of match the yellows to the top where Frisk is hugging Azrael. But and that kind of framed the bottom to the top quite well, from, you know, the hotlands into the core, going to the end and escaping into the surface, versus the more deeper layers of the underground, which was like what we're seeing here, which is kind of the bottom half of the composition with like waterfall and Snowdon and the ruins and all that stuff. And with the water being a light source here, because I imagine the water glows like what you see in the game, everything's kind of washed out into like a monochromatic, like cyans or whatever. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm doing here, because that would only make sense of what's going on, especially because I'm kind of going for more of a silhouette vibe here, rather than bringing out those colors like I did in some other waterfall pieces that I've done in the past. But yeah, and I just brought out Frisk stripes because it kind of matches the crystals. It's like, to give an idea, each layer with both the characters and the landscapes, they have their own horizon line, their own perspective, so they're not all being affected by one thing. They each have their own, and they also kind of have their own color composition, such as how waterfall is very, you can see I'm rearranging things because I guess I wasn't happy with some of the sketches. But yeah, waterfall has like blues and then like that accent color of the blacks and the pinks. And that's going to reflect and influence the colors of the characters around him. So it's like, Undyne is a great example because it's like her armor, especially in her arm, they're a lot more pale and almost like periwinkle colored because they're being influences by the colors and the light sources that are in Snowdon, which are very periwinkle and whites and grays and purples. But her head starts to more poke into the waterfall zones. And so she starts to get a lot more like cyan and stuff. So you can see like near her chin, it's kind of faded gray, like a grayish periwinkle purple, because that's the light and the color influence, color composition of just that one section of Snowdon. But then the higher you get to her, like more her forehead and stuff, it's a lot more of a richer blue cyan. I'm also keeping the characters relatively in tandem with the landscapes, because again, if everything was just super vibrant, very much like if I were to render every single character, it'd be way too much in the eyes. So if I make the overall colors like pretty damp, or washed out while still looking really nice and pretty, it really brings out the specific details that will not be too overwhelming to the eyes, like the highlights or the water, or like maybe the reds and stuff. And you can actually see that color influence shift of Papyrus being in between both the things, where the top of his head had highlights of blue, but then his face had more of a periwinkle highlight too. But yeah, and so I would just kind of put that all over the piece. Alphys. I never finished her fingers. It's so funny. Her fingers stay kind of like painted blobs. And I remember, because I posted parts of this, someone made a comment about it. They're like, oh, don't forget Alphys' fingers. I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. And then a week later when I went to start this project, and I totally forgot, and those painted blobs made it into the final render. It's so funny. Anyways, so I have some first point perspective going on here. So I'm just kind of bringing out that thing. You don't see me draw out the horizon line and the 1 point and all that stuff, but I'm just kind of following it in my head, and like, so it might not be completely accurate, but like it's definitely there, and I'm aware of what I'm doing. It is first point perspective that I'm doing. So if anyone's wondering how I got that like shift, that's what it would be. So I wasn't able to fit in an 11x17 space of Hotland and Core. So I tried to blend them together, and I guess I kind of rationalized it as like in Genocide they are deemed the same thing. But honestly, I just was running out of space. This section was really fun to draw. I really enjoyed it. I'm off on one of my lines for the rails for the first point perspective. I see that now, but 4 years ago when I wasn't as I didn't have as much of a trained eye. I guess I kind of missed that. But I was trying to blend Hotland and core together into one section. So thus, it's kind of like warm colors and like fires around it with the pipes of Hotland and stuff. But then it goes into the pathway at the door of core. So that was kind of my idea. Yeah, there's a lot of little characters in here. There's actually a hidden Gaster. He's so small. He's on the left side. Yeah, I wanted to make him kind of like secretive, just like how he is. But the big unfortunate thing is that when I made a print of him, whenever you print something out, you actually lose a lot of quality and thus a lot of detail, and he just kind of faded out into nothing. But he's there in the digital file, much like how he is in the coding of the game, I guess, so maybe that works out, I don't know. Yeah, this piece is so huge. I actually made it with the intent of making it like a 2 by 3 feet, like a movie poster, not so much like a standard 11 by 17 print. My only regret here is that I made Asgore and Mettaton not as important, and I kind of made them, like I made like Asgore big here, like bigger in comparison to like a lot of the smaller characters near it. But he's still so receded into the background. I do actually wish that I brought his form out and rendered him a little bit more, just because I feel like Asgore deserves that more now. And I think, I guess back then when I didn't really have the idea for it, I think I do now as an improved artist, that vision I could probably do a better job of. Just a side note, the amalgams, probably one of my favorite, more receded, faded characters. Those were a blast to paint. And but yeah, anyways, going back to just like what I was saying to Asgore and how I wish I rendered him more, I have the same kind of regret with Mettaton, especially because Mettaton obviously has such a special place in my heart, you know, from Death by Glamour animatic and stuff. But yeah, I do wish I gave them more of a render. And oh, I just saw a flash of a second ago. Oh, that reminds me, I wasn't even using a good recording program. I was using Snagit back then. Wow, what a terrible program. No wonder why the frame rate's so bad. But yeah, anyways, so we pretty much went through all the areas, essentially. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of doing Frisk and making, obviously, Frisk the major focus point, I guess, of the entire thing. Like, everything is framed, but they all lead up to Frisk, you know, kind of thing. They start from the bottom, and then you go all the way up, and you are at Frisk there. And I wanted to incorporate all the souls just with Frisk, because obviously they're all human children and stuff. I obviously couldn't fit like God of Hyperdeath Azrael or anything like that, so he's kind of being represented in the two faces, the side views of Frisk. So that's why one has smaller horns and a collar, and the other one is more like spiky with bigger horns, because one is his, like, you know, like teenage stage, I guess, and then it goes into his God of Hyperdeath stage, and those are the wings. They're meant to be the God of Hyperdeath wings, even though Frisk is in the middle of it, because Frisk is kind of like in between Azrael. And then from Frisk and Azrael's silhouettes, it goes up into the very end, which, you know, is Frisk hugging Azrael and Azrael giving back all the souls and opening up the barrier. And this is thus my, I guess, Undertale True Pacifist Undertale True Pacifist piece, where I try to tell a story of the entire Pacifist run from bottom to top. I even organized the characters, at least the main ones, not the little ones, to each section as much as I could, and tried to tell them in order from who you met first and on, and which characters you meet from who. So thus, Sans and Papyrus and Toriel at the bottom, with Snowden and the ruins, and Undyne and Alphys and stuff in the waterfall and so on. But you know, it's not perfect. Like Mettaton's up in the, well, I guess Mettaton's up in the Hotland area. So yeah, I guess so. But yeah, really neat. Blugie should, I guess, technically be in the ruins, but he lives in Waterfall, so. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope you found it fun and informative to, you know, kind of talk about this stuff. And let me know if you want to know, you know, you want more videos like this where I go back and go to older videos and kind of talk about them and stuff. Give a commentary and kind of my peace of mind of what was going through my head when I was going about painting this and the stuff I had. So yeah, thank you guys. Anyways, I will see you next week for Twitch emote videos. I'm gonna do a speed paint video of Twitch emotes, and I might do a little bit of commentary on that one. Yeah, I told you guys I really want to earn an editor with your guys' support. And so I'm putting forth the work into that too. Not only am I streaming every Monday and Tuesdays now, video games on Twitch, but gonna get you guys some new emotes and some new customizations and stuff. So yeah, thank you guys. Bye-bye. See you next week.